here's the next section is called the adaptive hospice. And Seth Lewandowski sent out a questionnaire. And the questionnaire was, what's giving you heartburn? What's working well within your hospice? What's going on? And Tim Ehrig is going to join us at 10. He had a call and a meeting that he was going to take, but I've asked him to join us today. Yesterday, he talked about an hour, and it's recorded, and it's going to be sent on how hospices need to make sure we're prepared to adapt for the Medicare carve-in. Okay, so we're going to talk about that within this hour before we go to lunch. Some other topics were employee recruitment. Mark had just mentioned, and there were 3 or 4 folks that asked about what are we doing to attract and retain and motivate great people, especially on the recruitment side. Another question is, last year we talked about millennials and how in the world to manage them. And we touched on what about the old geezers, the Thorpes. So what do we do with the older legacy employees that might have been core to your hospice for years? Are they like a bucket, that you're trailing behind your ship and it's just sort of slowing you down? Are they adding value? And if they're not adding value, how to manage them maybe uniquely and still honor them? What's the future workforce going to look like? Mark had just mentioned, what motivates them. I mentioned my son. The reason I mentioned my son getting a cell phone stipend is he said that was actually attractive to the engineers and status. He's a data analyst guy. He said that really, just carving that out of compensation was a pretty big deal to the people that work there. I wouldn't have thought, because the way I look at it, it's just coming out of the same bucket. But having the Mac Pro whatever thing and then a cell phone stipend was a big deal for him. And then finally, someone had said, it's been a tough year with COVID and with everything. How in the world do folks in here stay fresh? And I love that question. And last year on Friday, as we were leaving, folks were going to the airport, someone who couldn't join us this year but really wanted to grabbed me by the arm with tears in her eyes. And I'm like, are you okay? Did Billy say something? And so, and her point was, Hall, I love hospice. I'm in hospice for the right reason, but leading people is draining. And always being on is draining. And I'm exhausted, and I came here tired of hospice. I came here tired just of the whole thing. And in 3 days, just being around people that are facing the same challenges, and I've learned so much, and I've left refreshed. And so I've kept up with her, and sure, it was sort of just a great pivotal moment where she saw like-minded people and got energy from everybody in this room. And so she's going to join us next year, but her company wouldn't allow her to travel. So that's an example of what are we doing to stay fresh? So while we wait for Dr. Tim to get through with his stuff, why don't we start here and work up, okay? So it's been a tough year. Do we agree? I mean, it's been a political year. It's been incredibly social division. It's been COVID. You name it. And we have a reason to be disappointed in this past year. And yet, we're still here. So how are you staying fresh? What are you doing? Okay, here's one thing. So everybody got introduced, but one guy who's critical. Wait a minute. So Gons, you are critical. Y'all, when Gons introduced himself, he said, okay, I said, so what's your name? And he said, it's Gons. It's like the Fonz without the F. I was like, you have to do it. Right? So, but Gons, he had mentioned when people are watching the video, they can't hear. So instead of me having this, Michaela and Jennifer, you mentioned something. I'm just going to kind of walk around. Can you repeat what you said? How do you stay fresh?
We came here.
How else? I mean, you come here for 3 days.
Whenever I feel like I'm starting to get burnt out, and so I'm vice president of operations, it's fun to change something. So we've noticed, Jordan and I have done a lot of changes over the last probably year, and every time we identify something that's bothering us, for me, when I put a new system into place and make a change, even though it's a pain in my butt and I'm doing it to myself, having that change is always fun and it's exciting. It makes the next day feel more productive. And so it ramps me up again. So I like making change.
Okay. Hang with me. Thank you.
I think it started with coming to Sono, but our team has really focused on our team being the executive team being the number one team as far as supporting each other and building trust. And we make time to go out for dinner or, go do something to build that bond and just kind of release the stress that we've had because we have been running crazy for the past few years, and just having that time to kind of sit down and know that everybody on this team has each other's back and we understand where you're coming from. Really, it's huge. It keeps us going.
I would just add that the stress we feel often comes from the stress of our staff. So we've worked hard to try to do, sometimes it's little things, it's little games, it's little treats, it's just little things to kind of uplift the staff, because when they're happier, we're happier. And can I just publicly say a hello on behalf of Cedar Valley Hospice? Ray Thomas, hi, we miss you. I miss my Ray Thomas hug.
Moving into hospice was a fresh for me as a leader.
Can I just do this one?
Sorry. I said moving into hospice was a refresher for me, because I came from being a DON at a SNF during COVID, which was exhausting and defeated me for the most part. So it's more of a refreshing now. My phone doesn't ring like it used to. It's the best.
Thank you.
I think leaderships can be fairly lonely at times, and so I think as a CEO, what's I found, and you're alluding to this, the trip getting here, it's just having a place to go, but really not having a super tight time frame to get there has been refreshing, because that's not my nature and makeup. It's always go, 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 go. The next thing, cook it together, create something out of nothing. But this trip to get here, while it's been a little bit, it's by myself. I'm introverted, but I like being a part of groups. But it's been really refreshing just to not have places to go. So I think you have to be purposeful to carve out time for yourself, so you can focus on things that are important. Not to say our businesses, our patients, and things like that aren't important. That's why we're doing what we're doing. But if you don't take care of the center, you don't have anything to give, right? So it's been very refreshing to go out and look at different cultural sites about people that were a lot smarter than us under more difficult conditions, 1,000 years ago. And it's like, holy cow. We've talked about European civilizations, but Native American civilizations that were just as advanced, or maybe even more so, with less to do. So anyway, so you just got to take time out for yourself.
You do. Okay, that's the big thing. And part of the vision of Sono is that this isn't a spa-ish at Scottsdale, or we would be in a really nice spot and all getting back rubs. And that's good, right? But part of it was time away from the office in a place that's fun and uplifting and good, and that we take time for ourselves, and we have to feel good about it, so that when we go home, we've got tangible tangible things to take away, but you also leave refreshed. And so we'll often say these sessions, we try to make them very specific, not really presenters, but more facilitators. But there's times where you just want to walk down at Old Scottsdale. There's times where you want to plug in and grab lunch with the group, and there might be time you just want to do your own thing. That's part of Sono, is everybody just does your thing, but enjoy being together. This is kind of a different group. I do think that as leaders, if there's one thing that all of us will do, is we'll put ourselves on the back burner for other things. And I know that I'm saying that as a dad, but I know that's even more, with folks that have more family responsibilities sometimes to check in. So thank you for that reminder. Okay, Ashley, raise your hand first, and then I'm going to come back. But thank you. Thank you.
So just to speak to that, one of the activities I used to do with my team was to build your list of 5 things. Social worker in the room will love this, but the 5 things that you do to keep your cup full. And I know that me personally, I think I know, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing them. And so that feeling of constantly being on call or constantly being burnt out for me has a tendency to not be connected back with me being aware and putting myself in, getting the right perspective that I'm doing the things that fill my cup. And so I write down a list of 5 things. And anytime I'm feeling angry or burnt out, or that I don't want to come into work, I go back to that list, and it changes throughout the seasons, or wherever life. And that's one thing that COVID for me, that was a blessing was being able to realign our 5 things in our life that are most important, of a work-life balance, and being able to be creative in where we worked and how we accomplished the tasks that we had. It didn't have to be through an 8 to 5 schedule. And so for me, when I'm feeling that way, I always go back to my list and I'm like, what have I done in the last week of my list of 5 things to rejuvenate myself, and then setting that example for your team? Because if you're not, as their leader, doing that and taking good care of yourself, they don't have that example of how to do that. And I know I've had a leader that has been like work, and I think that that's my value, is by working really hard and not accomplishing very much, where you can have a leader like my team right now. They're fabulous. We have fun and we play, and that's what makes me love my job, especially right now. It's not a job. It's just coming to do something that I'm passionate about, because I'm aligned with the things, and I come to work with a very full cup and know what those, I'm consciously aware of what those things are that make me who I am, so I can give what I need to give. So
within your staff, thank you. So within your staff, you do 5 cups, 5 things that are good. You all said that you do special things for your staff. What are some of those special things? I'm going to come back. That you said, ice cream, well, it was something that you said, or you're the HR person, right? Yeah, you, Katie. Thank you.
I would say it depends on what we feel they need. We kind of try to keep close tabs on what they need, but sometimes it's something silly, like we might play office bingo, or we like to try to engage them in some sort of fun that we can do. And it's hard when they're all in different locations and out seeing patients. So it might be something that we can all do remotely like that. It might be a boxed lunch just to show appreciation. I mean, it's not really about the food or the drinks and stuff that you're providing, but a lot of, like, we do shout outs individually for people or for teams. But I think a lot of the value comes from listening to what their struggles are and then trying to make changes. Like Jamie said, a process change, or for example, like on-call is always a sticking point. I'm sure for everybody here, your staff get burned out, they're tired, they're on call a lot. So we've taken, for example, we've created a whole different on-call model that is really working well for us, that really has our staff not working a lot of on-call. So what I mean by that is the staff that are working during the week are not the ones who are providing the weekend on-call now. Very limited, and that's been a huge change to some of the things on the list with recruitment and keeping people. So things like that, where you're actually putting new policies or practices into place that address a real issue they're dealing with, not just giving them pizza parties, but dealing with the actual concerns that they have.
Thank you. Okay, Monica.
You know, as leaders, it is lonely at the top, and sometimes we carry the weight of everyone on staff. And I think for me, I try to be very calm, be very open to ideas, make your environment as comfortable as possible for your staff to be able to come to you and talk with you. And, we have had some employees come in from more of the corporate setting, and they have fallen in love with our way of thinking. I always have snacks and food that we provide for my field staff. They know that when they come to the office, they can grab something and go. When I feel like there's a lot of stress going on, we invested in a grill and we pull it out, and leadership will cook for staff. They can come and they go. Little things like that, I think, not only relieve stress on us as leaders, but the staff are very appreciative, and that kind of brings it down. For us, I feel it has worked. And we always do shout outs. That's so important. When you get your your survey and they mention an employee by name, they get rewarded, because that is key.
Thank you. Yes, sir, Patrick. 1 second. I feel like I'm doing a game show. I'm having to run over here.
Obviously, with COVID, it's really restricted travel. We've only been to a handful. We've got 19 sites. We haven't been to them. So and you lose touch. We haven't had events. So what we've done as the executive team, we're calling all 700 employees. And it's not, I don't call 700, we divided it up. It's still a lot, but we don't talk about work most of the time. It's, how's your family? Oh, I didn't know about that. Oh, you are in the middle of cancer treatment. Oh my, can I, keep you in my prayers and thoughts? So it's really refreshing. It connects you back. And for me, it's been, and for the staff, plus you figure out a few things you can fix. Oh, didn't realize that was happening. So just that has been great, I think, for us. Yeah.
So I'm going to write that one down. Y'all can't read my writing, but I'm going to send this out just so we'll do it. And that says change is good. We know change can be good. It can be bad. I want to say, but that. So how many folks call 700 employees? 9 people calling 700. Okay.
We got 2 months to do it. It's a full-time job, in addition to our full-time job.
Got it. Okay. Chad, Tim was right there. He was ready, but and then he's got another thing. I'm sorry. I kind of just really told him I needed him here for this, and so I just didn't want him to lose track. But I do think this one is important that we stay fresh. And when we leave here Friday, we leave here refreshed. Well, let's talk about the future workforce, employee recruitment, and legacy employees all in one. But I want Tim to grab this next if he's ready to roll. And if he's not, you can hear this, right? Okay, so I love the 5 things in the cup, and I love everything that was written here. They talk about the Hawthorne effect. We talked about it the other night. So, Tim, you're not late because I told folks, you had a commitment, and I told you 10, so you're actually early. Y'all, Tim Ehrig, for those who don't know, is a wonderful guy, and he's medically talented. He's smart as a whip, and he's a giver. And he's been core, and he is core to SONO, and he has always been. And so thankfully he joined us this year, and his schedule was squirrely, and yet he got here. I just thought in the nick of time, yet yesterday he and Jared went and played golf. So I heard you can play golf pretty well too. Tim, I'm going to hand you the microphone. So one of the things Tim was willing to do for us is to be videoed on how an adaptive hospice needs to prepare from the Medicare carve-in, and things that you all are doing and things that you would recommend to us in general. So you're going to have an hour on tape. I've asked him just to give us about a 10-minute overview and then open it up for questions, because with the tape, you won't have time for questions. So can I just yield the floor to you with this? Sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. How are we? Excellent. Please do not suffer through that hour-long video unless you have some Dramamine, okay? Anyway. So I'm Dr. Tim Ehrig, Chief Medical Officer of Crossroads, national organization. Throughout my career, I've been intimately involved in the macro world of healthcare, all the moving parts. And so what I've been asked to talk about today is really where we're at and what the future holds for hospice and palliative care organizations with respect to our relevance in the ever-changing world of healthcare. And it's taking on a greater importance today than it ever has before. I've spoken at NHPCO, NOC, CAPC on this topic the last few years. So the gestalt is the world is changing rapidly. The systems of medicine are being held accountable for outcomes. We've all heard accountable care organizations, variable payment models, etc. Where do we fit in? And how do we translate what we do to potential community partners so that we can have a elongated runway financially and growth opportunities? Okay, so it's important for us. It is tantamount for us to understand the moving parts at that level, or we're not going to exist in the next 5 to 10 years. I come from big health organization, sitting in the boardroom, understanding what their goals are, and quite frankly, it's financial. It's to mitigate their downside financial risks for high-cost, high-need individuals. That's our population. They have no mechanism of doing that, and that's where we come in. So squarely what's happened over the last couple of years, and what's born from this desire to mitigate downside financial risk for 10 to 15% of the population is the Medicare Advantage carve-in for hospice. But that's just one thing that's happening. We've got lots of alternative payment models that are being brought forth that you need to be familiar with as administrators and organizations. This is, at least for the short run, our lifeblood. Accountable care organizations born 10 to 15 years ago. How do we change outcomes for patients? Patient perception, caregiver perception, provider perception, and decrease per capita expenditures. What it's translated into, unfortunately, is who are we accountable to? It's financial and legal within the health systems themselves. So in the boardroom for several years, never heard the word patient. Okay, so just so you know what we're up against and what we're playing in is how do we translate what we do into saving systems money and continuing their revenue stream as best as possible, given what they're being pinched, right? Commercial payers and CMS are starting to put a little bit of teeth into financial penalties for outcomes. You familiar with MIPS and MACRA? How many are familiar with MIPS and MACRA? If you're not, we've got some homework to do, okay? And this is just 10 to 15 minutes, which will turn into an hour because I can never not be verbose. But let's talk afterwards. If all of this is just like foreign to you and you're feeling lost, come talk to me, all right? And we'll get through this muddy water together. So, all right, from the top, 15% of the population costs 80 to 85% of the total healthcare spend. This is over $4 trillion annually. Systems are being held accountable to about 2 to 3% of their attributable lives for financial outcomes. They are not being reimbursed for that segment of the population, which is pre-hospice, hospice. That's where we fit. All right? Systems have no mechanism to care for these people. None. They take primary care, they put in the home, they do this, they do that. They're just taking a care model that has failed consistently over the last half century in a different location. They're going to have the same outcomes. Where it's starting to bite them is their bottom line. They see that this does cost them money, whereas 5 years ago it didn't. I was involved in the ACO Pioneer Project through CMMI. It demonstrated what's possible. However, at the end of the demonstration project, CMO, CFO, CEO of the organization I was with said, we're shutting you down because you cost us too much money because there was no financial penalties. Well, right now, they're starting to feel it again across 3 to 5% of their population. They want us to take care of their undesirables, their term, not my term. What does that mean? We have to speak their language. What does it mean for hospice? Hospice, Medicare benefit, 30 plus years old. Most hospice organizations have not changed in the last 3 decades. I don't know of anything else on the planet that hasn't changed in the last 3 decades. I don't know anything on the planet that hasn't changed in the last 3 weeks, right? Who used, Airbnb and Uber and all these things just to get to SONO? I did. I've used all these things within the last 2 weeks. Hospice, while it is the right care for the right time for this population, we're antiquated. I'm going to hold us accountable for saying we are stagnant and saying, yeah, right here, it's touchy-feely, it's the right thing to do. That doesn't cut it in the macro world of healthcare. The systems don't care. Lip service patient outcomes is quality, life expectancy, et cetera. But no, it's bottom line, it's financial. So they don't care about what we care about. So that doesn't translate to them. That's not going to get us community partnerships. That's not going to be what is relevant for us to maintain economic viability and growth opportunities over the next 5 to 10 years. We have to understand that they're on the hook financially and that we have an increasing amount of data that shows what we do, yes, better for patients, they're happier, they live longer, caregiver satisfaction, but it saves money. Cost avoidance is profit for your health systems and for your payers. MA Carvin, Medicare Advantage. Go back to the 80s, think of HMOs, right? Medicare Advantage is a capitated model, whereas a private insurer, I'm taking on Medicare patients at X number of dollars a day, and I'm taking risk to care for them. Whatever's left over is I get to keep, all right? So similar to what we do in hospice. Almost 45% of all Medicare beneficiaries are in a Medicare Advantage plan as of today. Almost 50%. That's our bread and butter. Those are the people we care for. If you think that it doesn't matter to understand MA plans and all these alternative payment models, you're sorely mistaken, with all due respect. That is the way of the future for the next several years. We don't know a lot about the MA Carvin. To To the best of my knowledge, none of us in the palliative or hospice space sat at the table or were architects of this. I can make some assumptions it was born from the big lever arms within the systems, which are the payers and the big systems. MA wants to own birth to death. And they needed a mechanism to offload high cost, high need people. Hospice is that mechanism. CMS said, okay, we will do a demonstration project for 4 years. There's 53 Medicare Advantage plans around the country who have opted in. Several hospice organizations around the country have opted in as well. That window's closed. We can make an assumption, at least for the first 2 years. They may reopen once we have some data. CMS said this is good. This is going to offer end-of-life services to a broader range of individuals. Prior to this, if you had an MA plan, if you wanted hospice, you had to discharge yourself from that MA plan and come to hospice services. Now they're saying Part C, which is MA, Part A, which is hospice. There's kind of a melding of the two, and you can have concurrent care. And for 1 month, you can have concurrent aggressive curative type treatments while on hospice if you are involved in an MA plan. So they're playing around with what may be possible to bend the cost curve. MA plans are on the hook for reimbursement as it sits today for the next 2 years, which is a good thing. The biggest concerns we have in industry are what's going to happen to service of care. If you have the elephant in the room manipulating small and medium-sized hospices who are dependent on them for referral sources, they're going to say, this is what you need to do to play ball. It scares the heck out of me. Big organizations like Crossroads, we have a lot bigger runway, and it's just economics, okay? If you have an ADC at 25, you could be shut down in a month. So concerns are patient care. We have yet to see what's going to happen. We're a couple months in. The program went live January 1st of this year. Access, referrals, and reimbursement are the big things we're keeping an eye on. The biggest takeaway is the world is changing at the highest level, and it's going to affect us. And we need to understand what alternative payment models are so that we can approach those community partners and have relevant conversations. We need, if you're not acquiring data, outcomes data that is consistent with what they want, right? I'm talking beyond the Medicare regulations and compliance data. If you're not actively pursuing data that's consistent with what these systems and payers want, you need to start. And it's tracking patients. It's looking at their diagnosis. It's looking at the cost of care compared to non-hospice. So you can compare apples to apples and come in and sit down with the CFO, CMO, CEO and say, this is where I can save you money across these populations. And if you're an organization that wants to play in that field, which you should want to play in that field because you're going to have to play in that field, you need to understand what it means to be an organization that takes on risk. And I'm talking shared risk with your community partners for reimbursement. I'm going to guarantee you and my palliative program a cost savings of X% over this many days, weeks, months for attributable lives. And if I don't meet that, you don't pay me. Something, right? I mean, there's hundreds of different variations, and it's relationship based and based on the particular organizations you're engaged with. Having the ability and the desire to take on financial risk is going to gain you community partnerships much more readily than not. It's just the world we live in. Touchy-feely is good. I believe in hospice. I'm a hospice physician. What we do needs to translate economically to the bigger systems, or you're not going to be viable as an organization within the next 5 to 10 years. The paradox is that the system of medicine, right? I'm going to make the statement, is not viable at all. We've already hit the iceberg. Again, 80% of the spend on 15% of the people, 20% of the gross domestic product of the United States and increasing. Many of you have heard me say this before. It's projected within the next decade to 2 decades, given the exponential growth of this population, elderly ill, it could be 50-60% of the gross domestic product of the United States, which is an economic global catastrophe. It changes everything you understand about your business. It changes everything we understand about our way of life, right? We have to translate that to the C-suite of these systems because they look only to the next economic, what am I thinking of here? The next quarter, thank you. See, I'm not a business guy, right? My wife gives me an allowance, and that's about the economics I know. So we like to care for people. We like to make a difference. Unfortunately, we have to be stewards of this economic conversation. We need to collectively be a voice. Chad's voice alone is solid, it's great, but if there's 1,000 of us together, that's influential, all right? Given that systems have no mechanism of caring for these people, given that systems are monolithic and slow to change, and I would argue have already hit the iceberg, the runway is to play ball with these systems presently, but a decade from now, I'm speculating a lot of the smaller and medium-sized health systems going to go belly up. They're going to need community partners who understand this level of care, and that's where we have the opportunity to be much more influential, to have a seat at the table, and to have a vote on what happens to really change the paradigm of care. Because they're going to want to maintain, organizational economic viability, and they're going to need partners like us. So the short play is we got to play ball. We got to understand this. We got to engage. I think the longer play is the greatest change is going to come from outside the hallowed halls of these monolithic systems, and that's all of us in aggregate. In perspective, I belong to an organization called the Accountable Care Learning Organization, so the Duke Margolis Health Policy Institute, run by Mark McClellan, former CMS chair, and Western Governors University out of Salt Lake. It's an organization that has all the significant accountable care organizations, health systems in the country, Intermountain, Kaiser, anybody who's anybody sits at this table and they talk about how do we change care, right? And there's a lot of good work being done, but what's missed is what we all know here, right? The aggregate per capita expenditure reduction a couple of years ago was like 1.25% on that $4 trillion. I can't imagine how many hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, and tens of thousands of person hours it took to get that 1.25%. Probably more than they saved in aggregate. So it demonstrates you've got the biggest systems in the country sitting at the same table, don't know what the heck they're doing. They have no mechanism to care for these people. And I made this statement, which was followed by me being shunned out of the room, not really, but I said, look, the problem is systems look at elderly ill as expensive because they're elderly and ill. That's wrong. Elderly and ill are expensive because of what the systems do to them. It's a linear escalation of clinical intervention, and at some point, because we've experienced this in our home lives, my mother, our professional lives caring for people, that at some point, having things done to a disease actually hurts people and kills them sooner than if we had a different paradigm of care, and that's where we come in. Good care, appropriate care, is always less expensive. That's a translatable message. So we need to verse ourselves. We cannot be complacent in what has worked for hospice over the last 3 decades. Ain't going to cut it. It just ain't going to cut it. We are not independent practitioners alone. We have to find out, make a stand for ourselves within this bigger playing field, because that's the way of the world. It challenges a lot of people in our industry. There's one particular individual who runs one of the larger academies, National Hospice Palliative Care Association of America. I had a conversation with 2 years ago, and he said, we're going to take the stance of empowering hospices to absorb whatever changes come. You're already dead. Excuse the pun. We need to proactively be a voice to understand the movement, articulate our relevance, and make some changes. That's really all I have to say. So I'm getting out of here 15 minutes early. I'll open it up for any questions, comments, concerns, philosophical observations. I've got a comment. Except for Mark Lewandowski. Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'll stop talking as soon as you tell me that's enough. Okay. We talk about this all the time from a business perspective and a clinical perspective. And one of the things I want to say, we've been doing shared risk for a long time in 2 of our companies. And the key to shared risk is this, and I'll start this way. If I'm negotiating a deal with Billy and Billy wants to sell me his truck and he says $11,000, I say, done. Everybody loses and everybody feels bad because Billy says, well, crap. I should have got 12. And I didn't negotiate down. Actually, Billy feels more satisfied when I said, no way, 10. He says, 10.75. I said, no, I'll do 10.50 right now cash, but that's it. I just say $500 and he feels like he got a better deal. That's human nature. And a lot of business is human nature. So let's talk about shared risk models. You do not take a shared risk model without doing the homework in advance and then pushing back. And I'll say this, it's a two-way street. Every shared risk model is a two-way street. If you're going to share risk, you should determine what components of the deal you will share risk on and which ones are outside of the shared risk, right? So you say, and we've talked about this last night, that if you're going to do palliative care, know who you are and know what you're going to do. And don't just open it up to anything, right? It's a key to knowing who you are and what you can do and what your model is. And then say, within the components of our ability to serve, we will share risk with these types of patients in this environment. But if you give me a patient outside of that environment and we decide to accept, that's not a shared risk client. Your at-risk party will respect that and they will perceive you as a better risk candidate than somebody that says, okay, I'll share risk. Don't do that. Make sure whenever you do a share risk model, it's a two-way street. You're going to negotiate, because I guarantee that any of these payers that determine a shared risk model with you are going to have legal firms at the ready building a contract. You need to be ready to negotiate back and make sure it's a two-way street.
That's a great point, Mark. And I'll give you a 10.75. All right. Yeah. Okay, I'm done. That's a great point. You need good legal representation. Don't go into this blind. Systems don't care about us. They care about the money that we can provide or save them. Being very clear on what the demonstratable markers are, the analytics and data for outcomes for particular populations. If you have any questions, talk to me, right? I mean, I sleep and eat this stuff, unfortunately. Yeah. Oh, okay. I feel like Vanna White.
We did at-risk contracts for about 8 years. We haven't in about 5. And you're exactly right. What we found, and I'll throw out to you, if you go into any of the at-risk contracting, don't assume that you need to bring all the richness of what you do in hospice. That was our failing point, and we made it too rich and we lost and we had to stop. So understand exactly what it is. It's not to go in with a bare minimum, but you almost have to. Don't juice it up, and just be very sensitive to that, because you bring in an expensive model, you're going to be whittled down over time. Eventually, you're going to work yourself out. But it's a good space.
No, that's an excellent point. And to add to that, historically in the CMMI ACO Pioneer Project, my group hit 70% per capita reduction in expenditures, all ages, all diseases, across 3 years. If you take risk on 2%, you don't have to move the pendulum much on $4 trillion, right? So while we can, I think, fairly easily, get 7, 10, 15% per capita reduction in expenditures just by doing the right care at the right time, don't shoot yourself in the foot. And you can have a graduated shared savings model where, look, if we hit this benchmark of 2%, we get X. If we hit 5, we get this. Right? But don't cut off your nose to spite your face. But the homework is today, not next week, not next month. We all go home and life gets in the way. Got a million emails to catch up on, 1,000 phone calls. I got my parole officer I got to check in with. Got to go pee in a cup. This isn't recorded, is it? I'm just kidding. This is essential. I can't emphasize this enough. It's going to be our lifeblood, at least for the next 5 to 10 years. So let's get started together. Again, I'm available. Just reach out to me. Happy to chat. Happy to walk you through this. My experience. The greatest thing you can learn from me is there's 1,000 mistakes you can make, and I made them all. Okay. So, any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Appreciate it. So, thank you, Tim. One of the reasons we asked Tim to do this was with the video, you wouldn't have a chance to ask questions. We just want to make sure that everybody had it. So, Tim, you're heading out Friday?
Friday morning.
So you'll be around. So tackle him in the hallway.
You can't fall asleep. The video, you'd be dozing off.
So thank you. Let's go to this one. Employee recruitment. Unemployment is kind of an interesting number now. It's hard to find folks. Who's doing things that are different to gain new, great folks? What are you doing? What's working? Or is everybody like Mark and just can't seem to find the perfect person? We're all in that situation, aren't we?
We did some sign-on bonuses.
Okay. Oh, I know. Thank you.
We did some sign-on bonuses is what we did. We went up to $4,000, and we were still, struggling to find people because you've got bigger companies offering 10,000. We lost an employee to what was it? Was it Warm Springs? 25. Yeah, $25,000. Yeah, how do you compete with that? You can't.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We've done a lot of sign-on bonuses too. I have really kind of put my feet in the mud a little bit about them. We haven't really had a success story from them yet. So I started employee referral bonuses, which, we've always had them, but I went with a different model. I went heavy on the number. I went up to 10, honestly. And what I did was I divided it to have a 6-month payout times 3. So it goes to my person who was already employed, who brought on their RN friend. And as long as she's employed at 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months, then she gets a third of that $10,000. And that has had actually a lot of success with us. I think I've had probably a dozen where that's worked, and that has kept me then having 2 employees, the new one who came on, and then the one who was waiting on her referral bonus for 18 months. So
$10,000 paid 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months, as long as the referred employee is still employed.
correct. And the person who brought them on, they both have to still be employed.
Yeah.
So yep.
Good thought process because we've tried.
Here, I can pass it to you.
See, next year we're not going to have to do this.
No, just good thought process. I think you enrich it for the folks that are already with you, because your best word of mouth is the folks that are happy where they're at now, right? Because you really, let's just, right now, we've got 2 ads out in different areas for business development. Well, that's sort of a catch-22, because you really maybe don't want the folks you have to put out ads for, because maybe they're successful, maybe they're not. You want the people that are already happy somewhere else, to really woo them. But how do you do that? And so maybe, word of mouth from a good friend that they trust, is the best way to do that. One of our employees that left was with me about 4 years. I mean, she made an extra, at a much less pop than that, 20K in just recruitment bonuses over time, because we pay it out over time. But to enrich it like that to the folks that you do have that have been around a while makes a lot of sense. So,
Patrick, coming to you, and as we do, what we found on that at Qualis is people don't refer people that they don't want to work with. And while that can be a self-selective issue, it can be a great thing too.
One thing with aides, we've really been struggling to get hospice aides. We've started hiring folks that are not certified, and then we pay for their certification, pay them a stipend, and give them a little bonus. That's been helpful. But with nursing, I have no idea. We got 50 open positions and can't find them. So,
who else? I'm gonna hand this to you, and I'm gonna write that down.
I was just going to piggyback on the referral bonus. We've had a lot of success with that too. But we've also worked with Andrew Reed, and I know he's coming tomorrow. But one thing that helps us, we're in a smaller community. We're not in a huge city. I mean, I think we have about, 80,000 people in Waterloo-ish. But one thing that has helped that we hear is making sure that we're known. We have a reputation as being a quality employer. And so in a smaller area, I think that helps us a lot, because if people hear about you and they know that you pay well, or they know that you treat your people well, like a lot of people will come in and will say, why are you here? Like, how did you hear? Why do you want to be here? And I think a lot of it goes back to, well, I've heard a lot of great things about you and how you treat your staff. And it's kind of that branding. And we have been very fortunate to put a heavy emphasis on employee engagement. And we've won a couple of global awards in the last couple of years, so we can market with those, and that makes people interested. So just kind of making sure that you're taking good care of your people in our community has worked, because the word gets around.
You did win a recent award. What has to do with your staff? What was that award? How did you do it?
Yeah, it was the Gallup. If you've heard of Gallup, it was the Gallup Exceptional Workplace Award. We've won that for this year and last year, so we've done that for 2 years. And how we do that, you have to use their employee engagement tool called the Q12. And it's a 12-question employee engagement survey. And it's very rigorous standards to even be able to apply for that award. But you earn that based on your scores that you receive of how well your staff are, doing that. You have to have I think we had 91% of our employees participate in the survey, which is amazing, because you have to have a certain amount that participate. But it all comes down to these 12 questions and how you perform on those. And then you file you can make an application if you meet those certain standards.
So once you met those standards and you were awarded that, did the Gallup organization, they were the ones that did the press releases and things like that?
Gallup does their press release, and then they also release some of that to us for marketing to use and for us to use on our own. So there's kind of both.
So the reputation of excellence is external validation that you got.
Right.
Else using a similar tool to help screen, like behavioral things that Mark had mentioned earlier? Because you mentioned Gallup. Mm-hmm. Who's using other kind of tools to screen for behavior?
Predictive Index it was a really good tool. It was a big sell from my director of HR to myself, just because it's pretty pricey, but it's really helped us a lot on the quality folks that we do get in, because we can build out in that system. We can build out the qualities, the things that we want to have in a role, and then we can search for people that fit that role, rather than trying to get it round peg in a square hole kind of thing. So, and just it helps you fit better, helps them not guarantee success, but it helps you gives you better chances for success as that being a good fit. And like I said, that's been fairly pricey. It just depends on different packages, but it's costing us somewhere between 8 and 10K. 10 and 12K a year. So yeah. So it gives us really good feedback. As a CEO or as a top leader, you can get basically the PI or the metrics of all your team to make sure you know how to half this role or half this job is just communication, and making sure that people understand what you're trying to communicate to them. And so a lot of this gives you those communication styles, what to watch for, things that they'd be really good at, their strengths, their weaknesses, basically. So it's been really helpful.
Thank you, Chad. Ashley.
We use something similar. It's the Hartman, which is the Steve Byram method, and it also does, their communication style, but it goes a little bit deeper. It's more of a judgment tool. And so in hospice, we know that that's, their autonomy creates some issues if they don't have good judgment skills. And so that's what we've had really great success with it. In fact, pretty much we can hire an employee off of one score, and that's the Hartman, and we know if they're going to make it or if they're not. And it's a pretty incredible tool. So if you don't use it, look into it. It's really great.
What's the cost?
Depends on what you negotiate.
So the question was, what's the cost? And Ashley's saying it depends on what you negotiate. So we know Billy can sell a car at a good price, but
There's multiple different levels too, and Steve's a really great guy. He's come and done a bunch of trainings with us, and he's treated us very, very well.
and he's a psychologist, correct?
He's got lots of.
And University of Alabama, for example, uses the Hartman, so they actually do this to their football players, and they're looking for judgment, and that's part of talent is doing the right thing at the right time on the field kind of makes a difference.
And we've tried a lot of things, and this has been the most predictive tool of a quality good.
Okay.
A quarterback was decided based on the Hartman.
An Alabama quarterback was decided. Really?
Yeah, that's what he
How
said.
about a Boise State quarterback?
We haven't got them on board yet, but we're a little behind the times. We're good.
Okay.
He hasn't hired us as a sales team yet.
Yeah.
So are we finding then that the future workforce conform to the same behavioral judgment things? Are these things, are they generational? Are they relevant to attracting and creating compensation for younger workforce? Are they complementary to all ages? Is kind of my question. Or do they? One of the questions that people have always had about these things is that it's a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. If you find the culture that you want within your organization, sometimes it seems to limit others that might have a different orientation, a different perspective. Sometimes that's unhealthy, sometimes it's really healthy. So do you find that transcends ages of types of employees that you look for? Hartman, it does. Gallup, it does. Chad, on yours, the indicative, yeah. Do you find that it does is there any bias built into it that would counter-select someone? Does it prohibit somebody from being a good candidate? Do you ever sense it to be too sensitive to a particular model?
I haven't got that sophisticated.
Okay.
Problem. I mean, we've used it for the pitch and what it's been sold for.
Yes.
So I haven't really looked at it from that angle.
From what I've read too, is part of it. If it's part of the decision criteria for selecting the employee, it's great. But companies that hold on to that as the thing often expose themselves to some litigation if it's big for that very reason. So it's just got to be part of the mix, from what I understand.
And it's
It should be. Yes.
I mean, it's not the gospel.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what are we doing? It sounds like we got some bonuses, some going directly to the employee, some over here. A lot of it is trying just to find the best person. What else are we doing to recruit? Is anybody doing anything that's kind of different?
Well, a hot topic for me, and I was talking with Mark last night.
Whoa. Sorry. Thank you, Monica.
A hot topic for me right now is I'm looking at our benefits package. That can be a challenge when you're an agency our size to compete with, the bigger entities that can offer these wonderful healthcare plans. So that right now is a struggle.
1 second. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, one of the things that we do, because we are a smaller company and I don't have that bigger corporate overhead, is I look at market analyses for especially registered nurses. What are they making kind of around, whether it's in the hospice sector or in the hospital, and I'll go up 20% just to beat everybody out of that. I don't know what you guys pay your nurses, but I mean, it's not uncommon for me to have a case manager that makes $85,000 a year, plus with all the other stuff added onto it. And I can attract really good quality people, because when you pay that kind of money, you're attracting the best, right? You're attracting good people. And not only are we attracting good people, but we retain them. They don't leave either. So that's one of the things that we do.
Thank you. Who else? I'm going to add these to the screen real quick so we have benefits. I'm going to pull that out, and then we have pay. You do 20% greater. Okay? Sometimes.
Depending on the job.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
I was just going to say, depending on the job that you're looking for, like I know you were talking about aides that you have a hard time with, Patrick, hiring hospice aides. Sometimes we've tried to be building relationships with the nursing schools that are around, or, things like that. We're kind of trying to strategize a little bit in that space, because there's people that want to get experience, and they're likely going to be people that work their way up to be an RN in a few years. And so it kind of builds a nice ability for you to have them be part of your organization and grow and have opportunities later. So trying to get relationships built with some of those local nursing schools and colleges.
I'll grab this so I can write it down. So you kind of have a feeder program, right?
We're hoping, but we don't have that all figured out.
I'm saying you're going to do it. Okay, let's.
Interns is a good part of that. Allowing interns and students to come shadow, that's a huge part of that. We do that. It's been very successful.
And we've started doing that with volunteers as well.
So
we get that volunteer hours, and we have that funneling of
okay.
future medical people.
For those that couldn't hear it, Nita says volunteers doing the same feeder system as well, and nurturing, or you're building your own, growing your own. All right. So how are we attracting younger workers? I mean, you mentioned the feeders. Are they attracted to benefits more or less than older employees? Okay, wait a minute. You said one important word. You said many important words.
Lifestyle. I think that's the cool thing in hospice that sometimes we take for granted is our industry is not a 9-to-5 job. And that can be really empowering for especially the millennials and the younger generation, that we allow them to work. It was interesting. I don't know if Seth is in here, but talking about, like, I don't want to sit at a desk for 8 hours a day. I want to be able to get up. I want to move. I want to be able to create my own schedule. And that's the beauty of hospices. You can really do that. It's patient centric. It's patient driven. But I can be a case manager. I can see my patients at what's best for my population, my patient list, but I can also do that with what works for me and my schedule. And I think that's really cool. Sometimes that we put ourselves in a box that we have to be there from 8:30 to 5, and we don't have to do that.
Anybody else on hiring younger folks? One second. Thanks, Jennifer. I do feel like Vanna White. I actually met her on a plane with Ray Thomas.
Katie talked about it a little bit, but really marketing to, like, our culture, the culture things that she had talked about with our employees. And we have, as well as the Gallup, we have a best of the best employer in our area. And we've been nominated for that for several years. And, some of the marketing and branding we have done that people are like, what's going on at Cedar Valley Hospice? And they want to be a part of that culture and what we have going on. And when I do new employee orientation, we talk about how they're our best marketers. You got here because you have something special, and that draws people in when you have like people working together.
Okay, let me go up to the third one down, legacy employees. Anybody have any folks that have been there forever? Right? What do you do? And Sharon, don't answer this one, but what do you do when that legacy employee has just been there forever and wants to tell everybody how to do their job and might not be as innovative as you want and might be sucking the life out of it? Right? Do we all have them? But it's easy for us in Scottsdale to say we know what we need to do. But what have we found effective in actually doing it and communicating it, honoring the person and their lifelong commitment to the organization without letting them be a hindrance to where you're taking it? Who wants to start? Patrick and then Katie. Okay. Y'all got to sit closer to the front. Yeah. Thank you, bud.
We've had some folks in director level roles that are kind of getting a little burned out. They've been with the organization for 20, 30 years. And we've got a way now that we can get them to maybe slide into an education area or precepting, something different to kind of sunset out for a couple of years. And it has been great. We get some new blood in, a little bit of training, and we get them to feel good about their last couple of years. That's been great.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Katie, you had your hand up.
Well, sometimes it's not always pretty, and sometimes it depends. There's not a one size fits all answer because it depends if they're doing their job, like if it's a real hindrance or if there's a difference, I guess. But what I would say is in the last couple of years, we have helped some folks retire while keeping their dignity because they've given a lot of years. But at the same time, there is a time where you have to help someone exit because maybe they're hindrance and they're hurting the organization. So we had a couple of recent situations where, you start off like you do any other employee where you're identifying some concerns and you're talking about them. And I think we've had some success at trying to just be real with people and just have honest conversations and say, look, like this is what we're seeing in this, and you've given a lot of your life to this place, and trying to focus on all that they've done, but we really need to make a plan for this because this isn't working anymore. And we've been successful in doing that with a couple people where they've decided on their own to retire, and we've made it a positive experience and not a negative one. But it's not ever an easy situation, but I think you have to determine what level of, like, what's the level of harm, I guess, that they're doing by keeping them. There's times where people they're maybe been there 30 years and maybe you don't, I don't know. It just depends. It's so hard to say without, each situation's different, but I think we try to keep dignity in the process and just be honest and try to talk to them about what we're missing and what we're not getting and try to help them see that it would be better to go out in a different way than it would be for this to end in a bad way. Like, we don't want that to end in a bad way because we can't let XYZ to continue, if it's bad. But
Yeah, well, I had a question.
Well, okay, you talk pretty loud. So
Yeah. Do you ever encourage them to be a volunteer? Because I think a lot of times you have individuals that are ready for retirement, but they're scared to retire for multiple reasons. Maybe it's money. Could be a lot of people believe once you retire, your mind goes, you die soon. What do you do in that case?
I would say it depends on, like, if they're really negative or disgruntled about the conversation, that might be something to consider. But we did have one particular employee. He was 80 years old, had been working as a spiritual counselor, and he was wonderful with providing the spiritual counseling, but he was not able to do the technical part of the job. Well, that's important. You got to be able to do that. Now, with volunteering, he could still go out maybe and volunteer and then not have to do the technical portion of the job. So really with him, just identifying, why are you still here? And at the end of the day, he wanted to make a difference and he liked meeting people and providing that level of care, but he could do that in a way that would eliminate all these other stresses that you don't need to have. If you're not working because you need the money and you're working because you want to have that cup filled, we can help you fill that cup in a different way. So that was an example of a time where we did, talk about transitioning into a volunteer role, just because it would be something less stressful for him as well, and trying to help them see what that would do for them and the stress that it would remove from him for his life as well. I don't know. It's not an easy conversation to have, but you also can't let it continue just because they've been there 20 years. I mean, you have to take care of it.
Okay, whoa.
So Patrick, so thank you. So when you say that you would take a legacy employee that's not giving you everything or what their contribution isn't what it needs to be, you have them learn something new, correct? Is that a package thing, or is that something y'all just sort of wing to allow space for someone new to come into that spot? How formalized is this process?
We negotiate it with them, and we have we agree on certain milestones. What's retirement date? What's transition date? Maybe nurses don't want to be out at the bedside anymore. We'll flip them into the triage area because we've got 40 nurses there. So that, it's very formal. You have to agree because there's no backing out. We need to do that. So and sometimes there's more training that's needed, but we'll do all that.
Because when you were saying it, I was just curious of how formal. What else are we learning about legacy employees? They have a lot to offer, right? We have a lot to offer, don't we? Yep. Okay. One thing that we've got to remember, everybody in this room has to manage new folks, older folks, middle folks. We're all in the same boat. And it's never easy. And so if you don't have a sounding board within your company, that's why folks are invited here. Pick up a phone, take them an email, contact somebody else and say, can you help me think this through? They don't know the employee. They don't know the situation. Use your SONO friends for this very reason. That's what I encourage. Does anybody else have anything on the adaptive hospice as far as this session? It was more of a Q&A. It was just because the smart folks are in the room. Anything on employees? Okay.
Paul, I'd like to mention that Emily that's out front is our HR director. She's amazing. She's got events every month that she does that keeps people engaged and makes them excited, a little contest, then we give away gifts and things, just makes our culture more fun. The best thing we've done in a long time is during Women's Month, which was I think March. We had a luncheon in which 4 ladies from different entities came and shared their life story, and we videotaped it. And it was amazing at how far they had come in life and how important it was that they had been in a company that helped them grow into somebody that could pay their bills, could manage life, could start to think about retirement someday. It was really exciting. I mean, we all just sat there and cried. It was fabulous. And we recorded it, so it's on the website now. So prospective employees can come see that, and that was great. But Emily is a marvelous resource for ideas. That lady's great. The last thing I'll say about we really struggle with legacy employees because sometimes our hearts are too big and we're so deeply connected. And the hardest legacy employee to get to transition is one that doesn't have an easy replacement or is at a key age that could be a lawsuit. This is tough. There's no easy answer to this stuff. So when you feel like you're kind of drowning in this, you're not alone. These are hard dialogues. They're hard situations.
You're right about virtual, right? Hand the microphone and we'll keep going.
The irony with having the legacy employees is when you're creating a really good culture and you're wanting your employees to become your family and enjoy coming there, it makes that legacy even harder because you've created this wonderful, welcoming environment. And then you're like,
I like that. Yeah. Okay, it's 1:45.